Okay, well, first off, thank you all for coming here today. I'm Congressman Bill Foster, and it's my honor to represent the 11th District of Illinois in the United States Congress. And I'd like to thank Secretary Moniz. I've had the honor of knowing Ernie for nearly 2 decades and have been incredibly impressed at the work that he has done during his tenure as Secretary of Energy, and especially for his role that he's played in the development and the championing of the Iranian nuclear agreement. As the only physicist remaining in Congress, and in fact the only PhD scientist of any kind at all, I've felt a special responsibility to perform due diligence on the technical components of the proposed Iranian nuclear agreement. At this point, I'm up to, I think, my 15th briefing on this subject, many of which were lengthy individual briefings by the technical experts who supported the negotiating team. I have to mention that among those experts were many at Argonne National Laboratory, which I'm proud to represent, and at other labs throughout the country. We should all be proud and grateful for those who have spent much of their careers behind the wall at the reactor and weapons labs and in the intelligence agencies throughout this country. At times like this, to those who have spent their careers making our country safer and minimizing the risk of nuclear war, thank you. I'd also like to thank Dick Garwin, one of the 29 scientists and engineers who recently spoke out in support of the proposed nuclear agreement for his legendary contributions to nuclear weapons and technology, to the design and construction of the world's first hydrogen bomb, and in national technical intelligence and in nuclear nonproliferation. I'm here to add my name to the list of 29 scientists and engineers who have endorsed this deal and the growing number of members of Congress who will be voting in favor of it. I would like to begin by echoing the sentiments of Sam Nunn and Richard Lugar in stating that no arms control deals are ever perfect, and that our overriding objective must be to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. After carefully weighing all of the options and possible outcomes, I do believe that voting for this deal will make it less likely that Iran will develop a nuclear weapon. And voting against this deal, with no better options in sight, makes the potential for Iran to develop a nuclear weapon more likely. My support of this agreement is determined not just by trust, but by science. The benefits of this agreement, in terms of the limitations that it places on the Iranian nuclear program in the short and medium term, are well known. The limits on enrichment capability, the 300 kilogram limit on inventories of low enriched uranium, which represents a 98% reduction and places a fundamental limit on the breakout time, the ban on reprocessing and plutonium separation, and the redesign and rebuilding of the Iraq heavy water reactor to make it useless for producing large quantities of weapons-grade plutonium, the strengthening of the inspection regime, including end-to-end monitoring of the nuclear supply chain, and the prohibition on plutonium or uranium metallurgy, even for conventional purposes, which is a significant constraint on clandestine weaponization programs. In return, after a number of years of verified good behavior, Iran will be constrained only by its obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty and with the additional protocol. This emphasizes the absolute importance of significantly strengthening the NPT, so that the strengthened terms of the NPT will be binding in perpetuity, not only to Iran, but to its neighbors in the Mideast and around the world. This must be the work of the world over the coming decade. I would like to emphasize 4 technical points that have come up and lead to my support of this bill. The first regards claims that, quote, Iran gets to be in charge of inspecting itself in the investigation of past military dimensions of its weaponization activities. This is simply not true. The investigations will be carried out by a team of IAEA inspectors using equipment and sampling kits prepared by the IAEA, with the samples being sent to an international network of analytical laboratories, of which a number of US laboratories are members. I urge any of my colleagues who harbor doubts about this inspection regime to avail themselves of the classified material and briefings that are available. What I can say publicly is that our technical experts have full confidence in the technical inspection capabilities of the IAEA. The second technical point regards the 24-day inspection delay, which has been the source of major concern for many. Under the proposed agreement, Iran's declared nuclear facilities will be available for anytime, anywhere inspection. However, for undeclared facilities, including military facilities, Iran has the opportunity to contest what is normally a 24-hour inspection regime under the NPT and additional protocol for a period of up to 24 days. This is clearly not ideal. It is a negotiated number. However, when I look more closely at the many steps that are necessary to produce and to test a nuclear weapon, the ability to detect activity in a window of 24 days versus 24 hours has limited operational significance. There'll be more discussion in this in a longer policy statement that I will be releasing later this week. Thirdly, I believe that the one-year breakout time is an accurate assessment. This represents the reaction time that the world community will have for a diplomatic, economic, and military response should Iran decide to resume its nuclear weapons program. And the President has put in place elements to make military action a feasible option. Because of the importance of this issue, I have spent a good deal of effort personally vetting the administration's claim of a roughly one-year breakout time. This is complex because there are so many possible paths to fissile material and as needed for a weapon, and each of these must be investigated and examined. At the end of many hours of classified briefings, I support this estimate. The fourth technical point regards the weaponization timeline. This is the time needed by Iran from the point that it possesses a significant quantity of nuclear material and the time that it takes to assemble and test a nuclear weapon. Unfortunately, Iran has made significant progress toward weaponization, including such items as the multi-point initiation system for implosion devices referred to in the IAEA November 2011 report. Moreover, if Iran breaks out of this agreement, it will resume weaponization activities during the same year that it takes to accumulate the fissile material for a first weapon. Therefore, I concur in the assessment that in the context of a one-year breakout effort, the additional time for weaponization may be small. However, after the end of this agreement, when the breakout time to obtain fissile material is reduced, the weaponization activities will become the dominant factor in the timeline. This underscores the importance of maintaining visibility into all aspects of the Iranian nuclear program, and again, of significantly strengthening the non-proliferation treaty for Iran and for all other nuclear threshold states. The last point I'd like to make is not technical, but economic and diplomatic. As a businessman, as well as a scientist, I simply do not believe that there will be leverage available within the P5+1 coalition to obtain a better deal. If we do walk away from this deal, there is little hope in getting Iran and the P5+1 coalition back to the table at all. There is no reason to expect that the Europeans, Russia, China, and others would agree to additional multilateral sanctions after having just approved this agreement. Under that scenario, Iran could well attempt to increase its leverage by resuming HEU enrichment, and the multilateral sanctions regime may collapse. And if Iran walks away, there is no guarantee of any inspections at all. This is, in my view, a worst-case scenario for the security of the United States and for Israel. We did not negotiate this deal alone, but if we walk away alone. And last but not least, I am supporting this deal because I believe that it sets us on the path for a more secure future for the United States, for Israel, and the world. Under this agreement, the world will have increased visibility into the Iranian nuclear program under a robust monitoring system. However, this is not the end, but just the beginning of our work. If we really want to get serious about stopping nuclear activities in Iran, the Mideast, and around the world, we must take this opportunity to strengthen the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, including key enforcement and inspection provisions. And for that, I'd like to turn it over to Secretary Moniz.
Well, thank you, Bill. Of course, I thank you for your support of the agreement, but I want to say that we've been gratified to see, more members, but of course also numerous leaders in various key disciplines coming out to support the agreement. But I really didn't want to be here today with my old friend, Bill Foster. As he said, there used to be a time not so long ago with 3 PhD physicists in the House, in fact, and in both parties. But now we have 1, and I have to give Bill enormous credit for the way he has dug in. I can vouch for his 15 briefings. I can vouch for the time he's taken, not begrudgingly, on our side, certainly, of our scientists. He's done it here in secure facilities in the Congress. He's done it at secure facilities at the DOE. He's done it at secure facilities at Argonne. He manages to take his vacation in a secure facility at Argonne to go into this. So I think it really is something noteworthy when, again, my old Fermi Lab friend dug into this and has come out, I would say, I think, endorsing the science that underpins this agreement. And we've always said that the science underpinning it is the origin of the confidence that many of us should have. Now, I also want to recognize, and we'll soon be introducing another old friend, Dick Garwin. Dick is now, I'm sorry, Bill, but he's the one of the 3 of us now who's still out there doing physics, as opposed to our current jobs. But he's been doing it a long time, as you know, with great distinction, and I'm sure he will say more about the letter to the President in early August that Dick had a leading hand in writing, along with 28 other colleagues, one of the punchlines was that this is really, in terms of non-proliferation agreements, one that really sets some new standards, and I'll leave it to him, I think, to discuss some of the implications in that letter. The basic structure, the fundamental construct in the agreement in terms of the nuclear dimensions are 2. One is a 15-year period of very significant constraints and rollback on the nuclear program in Iran, presumably the peaceful nuclear program in Iran. And the second part, key part of the construct, is from day 1 to forever, there's greater verification with the agreement than without it. And I'll say a little bit more about that in terms of some very, very substantial and novel approaches. But before I do that, let me just amplify a little bit what Bill Foster said about the laboratories, and actually more generally the Department of Energy nuclear security complex. Some of you may have seen there was an article. Well, I joined the negotiation to lead the negotiations on the nuclear dimensions in late February, and inevitably that led to something of a spotlight coming onto the Department of Energy. But the first thing I want to emphasize is that the Department of Energy, principally through its laboratories, was involved from the very beginning in providing the analysis, literally daily when I was there, to keep balancing, as Bill said, some very, very complex trade-offs of parameters. It was the laboratories that did that. Some of you may have seen an article, it was a New York Times front page article, during the Lausanne period, that identified that there were 7 different laboratories, national laboratories, plus 2 of our nuclear weapons sites involved. And they brought different things to the table. I mean, Bill has mentioned Argonne for obvious reasons, and Argonne really was kind of our lead for the plutonium reactor redesign, for example. We had Oak Ridge with a centrifuge focus. We had Los Alamos with a safeguards focus. We had Livermore with a systems focus. We had Savannah River with a heavy water focus. And I could go on to the remainder. So just want to emphasize that The laboratory system was crucial, and I'm going to make a pitch that we have to understand that these kinds of capabilities, you don't just turn them on and off. So this is an example of a responsive network of laboratories building upon decades of taxpayer support for maintaining a nuclear security enterprise, together with clean energy, basic science, and environmental remediation. Finally, I want to go back and say that the agreement has a whole bunch of rather unique features. And again, Dick Garwin may elaborate on at least some of these, but I just want to note that not only does the agreement in some sense repeat and codify in terms of the P5+1 Iran's commitment to never develop or acquire a nuclear weapon, but it goes beyond that. It says they will also never partake in the development of weaponization technologies. It's unique in putting a significant, a 15-year stockpile, LE, low enriched uranium stockpile limit, which is an absolutely major constraint on their program. It is a first in having a fixed time period for access to undeclared sites that does not exist elsewhere. It's a first in having surveillance of the uranium supply chain, which our intelligence community, frankly, will tell you is a major assist to what they can do. It's a first to have containment and surveillance of manufacturing facilities for the supply chain. It's a first to have a requirement that for the lifetime of the Iraq reactor, the spent fuel, the plutonium-bearing spent fuel go out of the country. So we could go on, but those are a half a dozen right there in which this agreement really breaks some new ground. And of course, the converse of that is that, if this agreement had been undercut, those would be features that I think would be very, very unlikely to be able to get again in the future. So we are looking forward to Congress finishing its consideration. We are also looking forward to moving ahead, and I will just reemphasize that we started out with the science and the national labs, et cetera. I can assure you our job, their job, will not be finished, because implementation of this agreement rigorously for a very long period of time is absolutely essential, and again, our labs will be part of that. So again, thank you, Bill, for your analysis and the obvious conclusion that flows from that analysis, and for hosting this. It's a pleasure for me to join you, and it's a pleasure for me as well to introduce Dick Garwin, who, as Bill already said, has a long and distinguished career contributing to our national security, as well as other areas that we will not focus on today. So, Dick.
Well, I'm here because I was one of the first 5 who created that letter of August 8th to the President supporting the Iran deal. We got together, Rush Holt, PhD in physics, former member of Congress, had the briefings and so on. He just left in January. And he took pen to paper, organized a few of us, and we, after a couple of weeks of consideration, prepared a draft letter. We had wanted to do this earlier, but we didn't have the text of the agreement until July 14th. And it's a good thing that we waited. I'll just hold that or something. Because 169 pages are not something that you can just infer. You have to read it carefully and see what is implied. So we were happy to have the full text. We were able then to understand that it was not only the manufacture of nuclear weapons, but for the first time, the development of the technology of weaponization of nuclear weapons that was barred to Iran, and the particular impediments imposed on the two routes for acquiring nuclear weapons. That is, the plutonium route and the highly enriched uranium route. The plutonium route was to have been achieved in part, or the capability, with the reactor at Iraq, 40 megawatt heavy water reactor, like the one that has been producing plutonium for the Israeli nuclear weapons for many decades and has done a good job. But the Iranian reactor at Iraq will not be able to do that. It has been redesigned in close technical collaboration with the negotiating partners of the P5+1, so that, first of all, the fuel, as you have heard, will be shipped out of the country, but second, it will produce far less plutonium by a factor of 8 or 10 than it would have. Its power will be cut to 20 megawatts, and in addition to not reprocessing that fuel ever, the actual plutonium production will be much less. We actually carried out some of our own calculations on the lattice on different approaches for modifying the reactor at Iraq, replacing the heavy water with light water. Iran wanted to keep heavy water. It's okay. They have to get rid of a lot of excess heavy water. There's an article in today's New York Times by Bill Broad, actually, which discusses the plutonium route and says that really been unheralded the degree to which the Iran deal limits plutonium to Iran. And Sig Hecker is quoted as being rapturous in favor of the Iran deal for this achievement. On the highly enriched uranium approach, some of us have been involved informally over the past decade or so in discussions with Iranian leaders. And if I go back 10 years, Iran had a couple hundred centrifuges indifferently operating. Now they have 20,000 centrifuges, but with the Iran deal, they will have 5,000, limited to the IR-1 operating at Natanz. They will have an additional 1,000 IR-1 centrifuges at Fordo, but those will never see uranium under the terms of the deal. And they will be limited to 3.67% enrichment, and has been indicated, the stock of low-enriched material in Iran is rapidly to be reduced, has already been reduced by a lot, so that there's only 10 kilograms of U-235 in the 300 kilograms of 3% material that's allowed under the deal. There will be full inspection with modern real-time monitoring by the IAEA, which Iran has not thus far allowed. So we think, the signers of this letter, that this is an excellent deal for U.S. security, for the security of Israel, in keeping Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon and giving us a lot of time to reinforce Iran's evident decision not to move toward nuclear weapons. Iran has been a threshold nuclear weapon state. They could have had a nuclear weapon long before, but they decided somehow, evidently, that it was not in their interest to do so, and now they've decided to be more transparent about not acquiring nuclear weapons under the Iran deal. So that's the bottom line. Good for us, good for Israel, good for Iran, or else they wouldn't have signed it. Why is it good for Iran? Because it gives them relief from sanctions. Not that they can move forward with nuclear weapons, but they can, if they want, move forward with nuclear technology in support of industry and medicine. So I'm going to stop there. I know about the capabilities of the United States for monitoring the deal, not only the intelligence capabilities of the Department of Energy, which are very substantial, and at the weapon laboratories, but also from the other organizations. I've contributed to many of these capabilities and continue to be involved, and can assure you that the intelligence community will focus on activities in Iran for a long time. So we're all ready to answer questions. Thank you.
So now I'd be happy to open up to questions for any of us, actually. Are there? Yes?
I have a question for Secretary Moniz.
Yeah. There, Ernie, don't I come to the mic?
Just want to get your reaction to the news that the Senate Democrats now have 41 votes on the uranium, essentially ensuring the president may never have to veto it. And since you've been one of the key administration officials talking to Democrats on the Hill, how do you think the administration got to this point? Can you just describe the process in terms of blocking up the support?
Well, as Congressman Foster said, he's had 15 briefings. Other members may not have had 15, but there have been a lot of briefings, a lot of answering questions, because we've always said that the more that is understood about the scientific underpinnings of the agreement, the more confidence there will be that this is accomplishing its goal. And its goal is to verify that Iran has a purely peaceful program, or to give us adequate warning for a response if it does not. So I think that, at least my view is that I think continuing that process is what's been important. By the way, we are still in that process. Frankly, there'll be more briefings later today, tomorrow. We are not briefing to any number of votes. We are trying to get this deal, this agreement understood as clearly as possible, because we believe it does stand on its own 2 feet, particularly as Bill said, in the frankly as well, with the lack of any credible, attractive alternative that we have heard.
But it is significant that you got to the 41 threshold.
Well, presumably that's significant, yes. But again, we've not been working to any one number. It's really about, certainly in my role in terms of the nuclear dimensions of the deal in particular, it really is this role of making sure we answer all the questions that we can. And when it comes to the physicist wanting 15 briefings, that's great. We think that's terrific.
It's fair to say that 41 represents a good start.
Yeah.
Yes?
Congressman, was there ever any point through all of these briefings that you thought you might oppose this as you were going through all of this detailed information?
Yeah, well, I went into it sort of with a 2-phase analysis. The first is to do technical due diligence, because obviously if we pass the deal, if it goes into effect and then there's a technical flaw that allows the Iranians to drive a truck through it, it doesn't do anyone any good at all. And so that, at the time that I had a large number of secondary questions after my initial briefings, and for example, on the breakout time, the question is, what if the Iranians try this? What if they try that? And so the typical response to that was, yeah, we've thought about it. We actually have a report written on it, and we can make that report available for you to read in subsequent classified briefings. And so I have to say that I'm tremendously impressed at the technical skills of our team on this. That Ernie has been very effective in getting the top minds in our weapons labs and our reactor labs and throughout the country engaged in making sure that there were not technical flaws in this. That was one of my greatest concerns. And then of course the second part of it was just the analysis of what leverage we might or might not have in an alternative agreement.
Is there something where you actually had to use your own technical skill to double check something, Congressman? I'm not saying you took out the slide rule to double check.
Well, no, what I did is I actually downloaded a spreadsheet that's on Dick's web page that calculates the enrichment capabilities and looked at different scenarios. And so I've done that. And of course, there's a lot of things that I read and then asked the experts questions about how they calculated this. I didn't,
So what would be the most, I know I think I probably did a version of this question before with you, but as you reached your conclusion, what would be the most important thing you learned that only a physicist could learn in analyzing this agreement?
It's really not one thing, but just the wide variety of paths to nuclear material. That's something that wasn't obvious to me at the start, but you sort of go through. I've done significant project management of technical projects, and so I went into this, putting myself in the mindset of a nuclear proliferator in Iran, and saying, okay, what if I try that? If you find this is impossible or blocked by the agreement, what are the alternatives? And so going through those what if questions and making sure we had all the leaks plugged, I think, is something where I had a unique capability.
So did I understand right? You put yourself in, like, someone hired you to, I'm in Iran and I want to figure
Sure.
out.
That's sort of what they, I believe, call a red team analysis typically. You just set a bunch of experts putting themselves in the place of the enemy. And I was sort of a one-man red team representing the U.S. Congress in evaluating this deal.
I would just add that I think for Bill, for me, whatever, I think when it comes to, the need for, a strong technical background comes maybe not in understanding qualitatively how things like stockpile and number of centrifuges, et cetera, build rate of new cascades. Qualitatively, I think one can understand how those constrain the breakout time as defined, but I think to understand that quantitatively requires, I think, a little more depth there. Actually, as I have the microphone, may I do something unconventional and ask a question?
I suppose so.
Dick, as I recall in your letter, there was an interesting discussion at the end about how one might think about a new safeguards regime based upon some of the elements here, and it might be interesting if you could describe that.
So where do we go from here? Well, with the Iran deal, Iran nuclear weapons are back in the box. And can we do something to repress nuclear weapons elsewhere, in addition to encouraging people to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the AP, the additional protocol? Yes, it's already been mentioned that Iran undertakes not to manufacture nuclear weapons, but not to develop the technologies for nuclear weapons. And that's something that should be considered for inclusion in the additional protocol. And the additional verification and reporting capabilities, obligations for uranium mining and milling, things that are not thoroughly covered now, can be enhanced in further reducing the ability of people to acquire nuclear weapons, or raising the barriers to that. And in this, Iran should be with us, because Iran undertaking not to acquire nuclear weapons, and if they are sincere or not, they don't want other people to acquire nuclear weapons. So they should be a partner with the P5+1 and the vast majority of countries that have signed the NPT in enhancing it. So our letter to the President and another speech I gave August 20th, you can find on Garwin Archive. So if you look at Garwin Archive, you'll find the things I've written on this. You had a question there?
Just briefly, is that something that the administration is advocating for? In terms of
Well, I think right now we're trying to get the Iran agreement in place and implementation. But I think as Dick and his colleagues said, a lot of the steps that he mentioned, plus I'll add again, things like having a fixed time frame for access response within the additional protocol. These are certainly elements that would materially strengthen safeguards regimes if we could make them more widespread. So to me, this is the beginning of what's an interesting discussion in parallel, of course, to our main focus on getting the Iran agreement implemented.
Thank you, Secretary. We've talked about all the briefings and all the availability of the members of Congress. I'm just wondering, did Senator Kirk get briefings from the Congress?
Well, I'm not going to talk about any other individuals' briefings, but I would say that for one thing, we had one of the many collective briefings we had in the Senate. I believe 98 senators showed up. So in either individually or collectively, I think the very, very vast majority of members of Congress have been briefed in classified settings.
Yes.
If I may, I just wanted to get maybe the views of all of you on the plutonium issue.
On the what?
On the plutonium issue, you referenced that the New York
Well, yeah, no, it is. You know, the guys at Argonne Lab who did, as Ernie said, a lot of the calculations, and people around the world who understand reactor physics. You know, I was in the process of trying to remember all of the heavy water reactor physics that I thought I knew in grad school to get myself up to snuff on this. But it's this is something that was never out of sight of the experts in this, because they know the nature of nuclear arsenals in use today. And they know the importance of plutonium to those arsenals. The plutonium pathway is more technical, but easier, I think, to get your arms around. It's easy to count centrifuges and eyeball enrichment rates and stuff like this, and that tells you something that can be explained easily and with a narrative. But the detailed technical modifications to make sure that the reactor will not be usable for large amounts of weapons-grade plutonium is fundamental to putting the lid on the Iranian weapons program.
How big is that shop in Argonne that deals with the plutonium reactor design? Is this a guest project at Argonne?
It's actually a set of experts that have been working for years at removing high enriched uranium from research reactors around the world. Now, at the end of the Cold War, we were left with a very large amount of highly enriched uranium scattered around at, for example, research sites. And these reactors could be redesigned in ways to use less enriched uranium and still do their physics mission. And so the group at Argonne had been working for years on that, just reducing the risks of nuclear proliferation along those lines. So they had the expertise in place to talk about the modifications necessary for the Iraq reactor in Iran.
Let me just add what Bill just said. I believe the number is correct. Maybe somebody can correct me if I'm incorrect. I believe that over the years now, DOE has been involved in the conversion of, I think, 65 research reactors around the world from HEU to LEU. So this has been a major effort over the years, and Argonne is certainly quite central in that. Going back to the plutonium question briefly, Bill said it. Let me reemphasize, as one of the negotiators, that the plutonium pathway was certainly never out of our minds. I think in the public discussion, centrifuges seem to be what gets a lot of attention. But as the article today said, by far the preponderance of nuclear weapons in the world today have plutonium, number one. Number two, it wasn't long ago that the Iraq reactor, in fact, was viewed as the number one issue to address. I think part of the weight in the discussion that's been given to the HEU pathway versus the plutonium pathway is that, in fact, the plutonium pathway has been, I think, so clearly shut down with kind of belt and suspenders. As Dick said, first you reduce the amount of plutonium by an order of magnitude well below a significant quantity in terms of annual production, but then the suspenders come in and, by the way, ship it all out of the country as well. And I might add that there's also a 15-year hard commitment to no reprocessing and no reprocessing R&D, which would be for plutonium extraction, but also, and this is softer language, I'd say, but also the intent expressed by Iran to never reprocess. And to ship all of the research reactor and power reactor fuel out of the country. That, however, requires, the reason it's a little bit softer is that requires agreements with third countries to, in fact, take that fuel. Well, again, I'm not going to comment on that specifically here. I will say that in these research reactor conversions, of course, those that came from the United States, the fuel, we have taken that back.
Could you clarify a question that has come up? Will IAEA inspectors be allowed on military sites or bases?
Be allowed on? Yeah. Well, the answer is yes. The point is that the point of an inspection is not to go to a military base The point of the inspection is to go anywhere where there is suspicion, reasonably based suspicion that there is nuclear-related activity that is taking place there that has not been declared. And that's for any site.
I'm sorry, we have to get going, so just one more question.
Okay,
Bill, you have a question?
I'll pass. Well, I just want to thank you all.
Well, thank you all.
Ernie and Dick,
Thank you.
and all of you for being here.
Thanks, Bill. Okay.